Okay, 2.2 is all about reference angles. And so let's talk about what a reference angle means. First of all, our notation is this theta with the prime symbol. Okay. So when you see this, that's how we're going to note a reference angle. Okay, a reference angle is just the acute angle made by the terminal side of theta and the x-axis. Your reference angle will always be between 0 and 90 degrees. So let's look at what that means as far as how to find a reference angle. So our first problem matches up with number 1 on my lab, and it says to find the reference angle. And we have 98 degrees. Okay, so if I am drawing 98 degrees, that's going to be over here in quadrant 2, just past the y-axis. Okay. So my reference angle is going to be here. So if you were trying to figure out what that angle would be, you would take 180 minus 98, and you end up with 82 degrees. So your reference angle is 82 degrees. Now, we do have formulas, so if you don't want to have to draw it out every time, I know some of you are not fans of graphing, you're welcome to do that. Here's what the formulas look like. Any angle that is given to you that is in quadrant 2, you're going to take 180 minus the angle. That's exactly what we did here on example 1. Our 98 degrees was in quadrant 2, so we just subtracted that from 180. If it's in quadrant 3, let me make this a little bit bigger. If it's in quadrant 3, you're going to take the angle minus 180. Now, remember quadrant 3 starts at 90 degrees and goes to, or sorry, not 90, totally wrong. It starts at 180 degrees and it goes to 270. So if you're given an angle between 90 and 270, you'll just subtract 180 from that angle. And then quadrant 4, you're going to take 360 minus the angle. So quadrant 4 angle would be any angle between 270 degrees and 360 degrees. Okay, so here are the formulas for each of the 3 quadrants. Quadrant 1, anything in quadrant 1 is its own reference angle, because remember we said a reference angle has to be between 0 and 90. So if it's in quadrant 1, it is already between 0 and 90. So no real formula to look at there. Okay, reference angles are important because we're going to use those to try to figure out trig values in different angles. So we're going to next look at a problem that matches up with number 4, and it's telling me that the tangent of negative 150 degrees is what we're looking at. Now, first of all, the first part of the question wants to know if it's positive or negative. Okay, so this time I'm noticing that my angle that's given is a negative angle. Okay, and we always want our angle to be between 0 and 360 so that we can figure out what the reference angle should be. See our little formula for our quadrants here, for our reference angles here. We want our angle to be between 0 and 360. So if it's not an angle between 0 and 360, we just need to find a coterminal angle for that. There we go. My pen was stopped on me. So the coterminal angle, we learned in the previous section that you're just going to add or subtract 360 degrees to get a coterminal angle. So if I take negative 150 and I add 360 to that, then that gives me 210 degrees. Okay, that is an angle between 0 and 360, and actually 210 would be in quadrant 3. So in quadrant 3, is tangent positive or negative? Okay, well, remember, all students take calculus. In quadrant 3, tangent is positive. So I would answer that one as it's in positive, and I say that it's because it's in quadrant 3. Okay, and the reference angle can now be found because since I know it's in quadrant 3, my quadrant 3 formula is to find the reference angle. I'm going to take the angle, which is 210, and subtract 180. So I'm using this here because my theta, my given angle, needs to be between 0 and 360. That's going to give me 30 degrees. So my reference angle is 30 degrees. So what this means is when the last part of the problem is asking you to find the exact value of the tangent of negative 150. Okay, the fact that we know our reference angle is 30 degrees tells me that I'm going to use a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And remember, our sides on the 30, 60, 90 are 1, radical 3, and 2. 1 is across from the 30 degrees, radical 3 is across from 60, and the hypotenuse is 2. So when I'm looking at the tangent of 30 degrees, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So opposite would be 1, adjacent would be radical 3. So I have 1 over radical 3, which I cannot leave with a radical on the bottom. So I multiply to rationalize that, and I end up with radical 3 over 3. Okay, since this actual angle is in quadrant 3, it stays positive, and so my answer is radical 3 over 3. Okay, our next example matches up with number 8. And it says to find the exact values. Okay, so both the last problem and this problem are saying exact values, so that's why I cannot just type tangent negative 150 into the calculator. Okay, this is giving me 1590 degrees, so 1590 degrees. It wants me to find the sine of that, the cosine, and the tangent. And then it wants me to find the cosecant, the secant, and the cotangent. Okay, so first of all, 1590 is outside of our 0 to 360. So I'm definitely going to need to find a coterminal angle. So I want to subtract 360. But obviously subtracting 360 is still going to be too large of a number. So I'm going to do that several times. And you could just subtract 360 times 2 or times 3 or however many, or you can just keep subtracting 360. I'm getting closer. There we go, 150. So this reference angle is 150, or sorry, theta is the same. The coterminal angle is 150 degrees. That is in quadrant 2. So my reference angle would be 180 minus 150, which is 30 degrees. Okay. So actually, and y'all can't see what I just wrote, I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. Okay, so since I know my reference angle is 30 degrees, I can actually use this triangle that I already drew for the last problem. Okay, and you're going to find this to be the case. All of these problems are either going to use the 30-60 or the 45-45 right triangle. So if you just want to draw those out once on your paper, then you can just keep referencing that depending on what it's asking for. Now, also pay attention to the fact that we were in quadrant 2. So remember back here, quadrant 2 means sine is positive. So I can go ahead and put negatives on all of these others. Okay, so if sine is positive, then cosecant is also going to be positive. The others will be negative. Okay. Okay, so using this triangle that I have circled in green here, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite would be 1 and the hypotenuse would be 2. So 1/2. That's going to make cosecant 2. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so adjacent side from 30 degrees is radical 3 over the hypotenuse. So that's going to be negative radical 3 over 2. That's going to mean secant is negative 2 over radical 3. Rationalize that to get negative 2 radical 3 over 3. So I just rationalize the denominator similar to what I did right here with tangent. And my tangent should be the same thing that I already have back here. The radical 3 over 3 is just negative this time because we were in a different quadrant. Okay, and then that makes cotangent radical 3 because I'm going to flip this instead of flipping the radical 3 over 3 just to save some time. So draw the 30-60 and the 45-45 right triangles and go from there. Just remember that if you need to go from the 60-degree angle, then your opposite side is going to be different than if you're going from the 30-degree angle. Okay, moving on to the next problem. This one matches up with number 15. And it says to evaluate. And we have 2 tangent squared 135 degrees plus 5 sine squared of 120 degrees minus the cosine squared of 90 degrees. Now this one I do want to show you how to do on the calculator. You could go through and find each of these, like that tangent value, that sine value, and that cosine value, and plug them in and work it through. But I want to make sure you know how to do it on your calculator as well. Remember that this squared part here, actually means the tangent of 135 degrees squared. Okay, so when I put it in my calculator, make this a little smaller so we can see the whole problem. That's so small I can't see what I'm writing, but there we go. So first of all, double check, make sure your mode is in degrees. Probably is because we changed that earlier. Okay, and then I'm going to type in 2 tangent of 135 and then square it. Okay. And then plus 5 sine of 120 and then squared. Notice I'm not putting the squared until after I close that second parentheses, because if you put it here after the 120 and the parentheses there, it looks like you're squaring 120 instead of that sine value. And then minus cosine of 90. And I forgot my parentheses there, didn't I? After I made such a big deal about that. There we go. And squared. And there's your answer. Now, I think it's going to want your answer as a fraction, so just go to math and change it to a fraction. 23/4. Okay, then the last problem I want to go over with you all matches up with number 21. And it says that we have cosecant theta equals negative radical 2, and it wants you to find theta when theta is between 0 and 360. Okay, so we have been finding the trig ratios when we're given an angle. Now we're kind of doing the opposite. We're trying to find the angle. First of all, if it's given you one of the reciprocal identities like cosecant, secant, or cotangent, I would probably change it in terms of the reciprocal identity. So in other words, this is the same thing as the sine of theta equals -1 over radical 2. Okay. And like I said, you don't have to do this, but I just remember the sine, cosine, tangent a little faster because I know sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Okay. And so it's easier for me to see what's going on there if I think about the sine, cosine, and tangent. But totally up to you. If you don't want to switch it, you don't have to. But I can quickly see that my hypotenuse has to be radical 2. So if my hypotenuse has to be radical 2, then I know I'm dealing with the triangle that's 45, 45, 90, because those legs are 1s and the hypotenuse is radical 2. Okay. So I know the angle has to be an increment of 45 degrees. Now the other part is this negative sign. So where is sign negative? Well, remember all students take calculus, so it's not going to be in quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. So I've got to figure out the 45-degree angle in quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Okay, so it's not going to be the 45 degrees there. I just have to figure out which angle in quadrant 3 would make 45 degrees here. Well, if it's going to make 45 degrees there, I need to add 180 to it. So 180 plus 45 would be 225. Okay, and if it's going to make 45 degrees here, then that's basically 360 minus that 45, because all the way around, I'll do this part in green, all of that is the angle I'm looking for, and all the way around is 360. I'm just 45 degrees short, so I'm subtracting 45. That's going to give me 315 degrees. So my answers here would be 225 and 315. Okay, that finishes up 2-2. Let me know if you have any questions.